We do.
Yeah, we got you and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, I will. All right, y'all, I'll call us to order. We're a couple of minutes after 10. Appreciate all of my House and Senate colleagues being here for our meeting today. Very important and weighty work we're going to be undertaking today. Y'all could have mixed it up, House and Senate. Y'all didn't have to all stay on each side, but it would make people nervous if we intermingled, you know. In the way of calling us to order, for those of you who have been on the committee, I'm going to ask for your indulgence a little bit. Ronnie's going to give us a brief introduction to the Code Committee for you new members, going over the history, powers, and duties, as well as the contract. So, and I think there's a sign-in sheet circulating. If you hadn't signed in, be sure and do that. Folks that run this committee like to keep a good record of everything. So I see Manley's got it over here. If it needs to come back this way, y'all send it around. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ronnie Frith. And Ronnie, you have the floor.
Okay. I do this every 4 years. We've got 4 new senators on the 4 new House members and 3 new senators on the committee. Code Committee. Well, the official name is the Joint Legislative Committee on Compilation, Revision, and Publication of Legislation. And so you can see why we call it the Code Committee. It was created by statute 1996. It was modeled after the Legislative Budget Committee, and the Peer Committee has 2 primary duties. First is to provide for the publication of laws of a general nature enacted by the legislature each year in the Mississippi Code. And that's done by a code publisher that the committee has contracted with. Second is to provide for the distribution of code sets and annual supplements to the state and local agencies and officials that are entitled to get them by law. And we call those the public subscribers in the contract. The committee entered the current contract in 1998, October 1998. Before that contract, the duties that the committee does were performed jointly by the Attorney General and the Secretary of State. Well, not jointly. The AG did the editorial work that Ethan and I do, and then the Secretary of State did the distribution, which is now handled by the Reference Bureau on behalf of the committee. The committee was created primarily to provide the legislature with official and direct input in the publication of the laws that it enacted, because we published them and somebody else was deciding where they went and all that. So that we were one of the few states that didn't have any legislative input on the code. One thing that I want to emphasize, the committee is not involved with the publication of anything except the code. That's why we probably should change the name to the Code Committee officially. They don't do the general laws, the House and Senate journals, or the local and private laws. Those duties are performed by the Secretary of State, and the committee's duties are limited to preparing the general laws enacted by the legislature for publication in the code. The committee generally meets just once a year, and we say this is our annual meeting, usually in August. And y'all consider the following matters, all of which are on the agenda for today. First is correcting minor non-substantive errors found in the code and recently enacted legislation. Second, determining the controlling versions of code sections when those sections were amended by more than one bill during the session. Third, merging or integrating the text of multiple amendments to the same code section if certain criteria are met. And 4, approving any requested price increases for code products requested by the publisher. The committee is staffed by 2 co-counsel, the joint committee, and there's a House co-counsel, and I'm the House co-counsel, and Ethan Samsel to my right is the Senate co-counsel. We are really also the Reference Bureau, the employees of the Reference Bureau, Legislative Reference Bureau, are responsible for the distribution of the code products to the public subscribers. Ethan and I, as co-counsel, are liaisons with the code publisher throughout the year. We've been working really throughout the summer. We get spreadsheets. The laws don't just jump into the books. You know, y'all pass them. We have Lexis has a Mississippi editor, an editorial staff, and they send us spreadsheets recommending where to codify them and all kind of questions that we've been doing. Ethan and I have been doing. So that's what we do as preparation to the publication of the supplement. I want to mention that the budget for the committee is currently $400,000. That's a separate line item in the legislature's appropriation bill. It was originally $300,000 in 1998, so it's only gone up really once in the entire time. And we're getting close to the max on that now just because of increases that we've had over the years. Now, this is something that you might not think, but we don't, or might be surprised, we don't pay Lexis anything for editing, for publishing, for printing, for shipping. Zero. We get all those services for them for nothing. We get some other states have their own in-house offices called Code Revisor's Office that do all that, and it's probably 3 to 5 employees. And so Lexis, Ethan and I liaise with the editor, but she does the lion's share of it initially before we get it. So where does Lexis get the money? What do they do it for? Well, by the statute and by the contract, we have committed to purchasing a number of sets and supplements of the code. And it's between $1,400 and $1,500 per year. It's gone down a little bit, but it's about $1,450, I think. And the other thing Lexis gets from it is the exclusive rights to publish the official code. But anyway, the committee is required to buy these sets by statute. So if you change that, want to change that, the committee couldn't do it. That would need to be done by statute. Let's look briefly at some of the handouts. I'm just going to touch on them, but I wanted, and y'all can keep them too, obviously. The first one is the statutes that create the committee. We'll touch on those real quickly. The committee, you can see on 1-1-103, it's a 14-member committee, equally divided between the House and Senate. On page 29, the 1-1-107, the committee's main duty under this statute is entering into the contract. And then 1-1-109, Ethan and I will be covering that later as things you vote on. I've got an arrow on page 30, like a left arrow, with correcting manifest typographical and grammatical errors. But look at the lead-in language of that. In preparing acts of the legislature for publication in the code after the adjournment of each session and without altering the same meaning or effect, the joint committee is authorized to do these things. So we get, and y'all may get questions about, oh, there's an error in this appropriation bill. Can the code committee fix that? Is there an error in the local and private bill? Can they fix that? No, you can't. The only changes you can make are small manifest errors that appear in statute or in laws that are going to be published. So you're making those change for preparing it in the code. It does not actually change the law that was passed that goes into the general laws. So, and then on the next page, 31, and Ethan's going to get into that. This is a big part of what y'all do, a big part. Y'all pass laws that amend the same code section throughout the session. And some people don't understand we've even had lawyers say, that's just crazy. How can the legislature do that? Like it's a, you know, they don't know what they're doing. Well, y'all have code sections in different bills because they're in there for different purposes. And so you wouldn't put all amendments to the code section, one code section in the same bill necessarily. And when you don't, one bill is ultimately going to control and wipe out the earlier versions. So y'all vote to merge or integrate is the term used here, the amendments in each of the bills to put them into one merged version. Let's see, flip near the end. It's kind of it says page 5, 111, but it's been amended. This is it's 1-1-111. Distribution of the Code of 1972. This is the statute that says who gets the code, and you can see it's several pages. And this is, as I said, required by statute. There are some volumes that of different code products that you get, like the court rules and some others that are by contract, but this is by statute. So if you change who gets the code, you would have to amend the statute, or the legislature would. The people that get the code, the official code, I mean, the public subscribers, you know, around here, the codes have blue covers. If you're in private practice, you'll notice they have green covers. Lexis doesn't like that because they have to, you know, they can't just do them all the same. But by law, the reason that the legislators get the green cover is, I've underlined it at the top of page 3, that it's an exception that y'all don't have to turn your set over to your successor in office. All other officials and agencies have to do that. On page 20, 1-1-57, and then on page 22, basically it says that the committee has to provide for the publication of volumes and supplements to meet the statutory requirements. So I'm going to skip over the rest of those in there. And the next thing I want to go over just real briefly, the contract we talked about. This is the contract. It says agreement for publication. Should be the next thing in your handout. And just kind of flip through it. I've kind of put check marks by it. There's editorial duties of the publisher, what they have to publish, the publication duties, the supplements, the replacement volumes. Those are the new hard volumes that you do. We're going to have that on a list. You do about 5 or 6 a year. I do want to emphasize about the prices. Lexis cannot raise the prices without you voting on it. And also the state, it's on page 15, what I was saying, setting of the prices. And on page 16, government purchases, the price that Lexis charges to the private sector, we get a discount of 50% on that. So we pay only half of the private sector price. Go to the very end. The contract was in 1998. Generally, it's renewed for 4 years. There was one time when it was renewed for 2 years and then another 2 years to get it back on the cycle. But you'll see I have 2 letters here. One was the first letter and one was the last letter, most recent letter, where Lexis wants an official letter showing that we renewed the contract. And we amended the contract the first year because it said after the first renewal, then it would be on a year-to-year basis. And now it says you can do it on anything up to 4 years. And like I said, except for the one time we did 2 years, it's been 4 years. The very last letter, Philip Gunn was the chairman in 2023. It was actually done in 2022, I believe, is when the meeting was. But the committee, excuse me, the contract is in effect until October 14th, 2026. So that'll come up in the 3rd year of this term. A quick explanation about why we haven't put it out for bid in the last 25 years. Even in 1998, but particularly now, the number of companies that publish codes and law books, they were being consolidated greatly in 1998. Now you've got West and Lexis, and that's about it. West bid for it in 1998 and they lost. And they spent, we were told, over $1 million to create their own code. They have their own code. If you read Supreme Court opinions, our state Supreme Court opinions, they cite the statutes to the West annotated code instead of the Mississippi Code of 72. So they're not going to bid for it. I mean, why would they bid for it? They've got their own code. And so Lexus would probably be the only bidder. And as long as we have a good working relationship with them, we just think that we have recommended to renew it year by or term by term. And so, but we do get questions occasionally about why it's not put out to bid. I've asked Anders, if you were the only bidder, would the prices be the same as they are now? And he's diplomatic and says, well, we always try to maximize revenue. And I think his answer probably would be, well, of course we would. So anyway, that's just an aside on that because some people have some questions about that. The next handout is just really some appropriation bills. I wanted to just, you don't have to look through them because I've noted it on the first one. The first page, I've noted how it's changed over the years. The first appropriation bill after the contract in 1998 was during the 99 session, and it was for $312,000. And I don't know why, but in 2000, it went down to 300,000, but it stayed that way every year up until 2012 when it was raised to 375. And then in 2013, it was raised to 400. So it's been 400 since for the last 11 years. And, you know, with increases, gradual price increases over the years, we're getting close to that. We're right up under that 400,000. So it's probably going to have to be raised next year. But anyway, you can see that in 25 years, it's gone from about 300 to up to $400,000. Let me see, there was one other thing I wanted to say, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be finished about that. Oh, yeah. One of the things that I want to emphasize is the committee can't legislate, and that might seem obvious. The legislature legislates, but when y'all are voting on amending, voting to integrate amendments to different, to one code section by more than one bill, we have had people say, well, can you take that out? Can you change it to this? Can you merge here, but not merge here in that section? And our y'all statutory authority and committee has guidelines too on it that you have to take what the legislature did. You can't create a patchwork quilt because that's not what the legislature passed, and that would be legislating. And that may sound just, well, what's the problem with that? Well, it's really unconstitutional for the legislature to transfer any of its powers to legislate to an official or to a committee. Only the legislature can legislate. So you'll notice when Ethan presents the merged sections that they contain all of the language in one bill and all of the language in the other bill. So they get put together so one doesn't wipe out the changes in the other, but what the merged version will contain language, all of the language passed by the legislature for those code sections. Okay, so that's all I had on that. The next thing.
Okay, Ronnie, we'll move on to that next section to a correction of errors in the code and the 24 legislation. So we'll recognize you for that.
Okay, that's the next handout. It says Mississippi Code errors. For those of y'all that have been here before, you know how I've structured it here. If I just said change this word to that word, you wouldn't know what I'm talking about. Now I have copies of all the statutes. If you want to see it in context, I have them right here in the file. But what I started doing years ago is first saying what the change is, and then explaining or cutting out part of the sentence, how it reads now and how it would read with the change, so you can see it in context, and then an explanation. But what I'll do, I think we typically let y'all look at it, but I'll just, and have any questions, but I'll just go through a few. Like you can see in the very first one, the bill said the court administrator appointed to section 3. Well, the word pursuant was left out. So we added the word pursuant. There's several on here where insure with IN, and it really, insure generally means insurance. It also means to make certain that something happens, but it's not the normal meaning of it. So there's several of those changing insure, IN to e-insure. If you look at page 2 at the bottom, the Administrative Procedures Act has been recodified, and so the references are wrong now in the code, so we're changing that. Another one is on page 4, a misspelled word. It's a real word, but internment was used instead of interment, meaning to bury somebody. Internment is to be confined in a prison. It was right one place in the bill and wrong the other place. So there were some places, look on page 6, there were some, like there was a subsection 2, 3, there were 2 subsections named number 2. So you got 2 and then 2, 3, 4, 5. So we renumbered those. The word 82 is supposed to be 80 instead of 8. There was one more I wanted to show you that was really a good example. Well, anyway, I think I'll find it, but what we typically do is allow, 4 to 5 minutes or less. Y'all just look over them. You can see, I will tell you this. For the standards that we use, it says manifest errors, and we're very conservative on that. If we don't know how it should be changed, we don't change it. If we have any doubt about it, we don't change it. And our kind of our standards that we developed over the years in analyzing is manifest means you pretty much have to look at it and see something's wrong. Now, that doesn't mean you can't, like if there's a reference to a code section, you can't look it up and see that it's clearly wrong. But you can't have somebody just come in and say, oh, that's not what we intended. This is what it should be. And here's the draft I had, or here's what the lobbyist says. We've had that happen a lot of times. Or that sentence shouldn't have been in there. We meant to drop that out in conference. No, we can't do that. It's got to be clear on its face that it's an error and pretty much clear what it should be changed to. And so generally, as I said, they're generally minor non-substantive errors, but it's better to correct them because they're grammatically wrong. There's one in here, the law y'all passed on the intestate succession of people conceived after the death of the person. They cited the wrong chapter or wrong title of the United States Code. So, it was section 41, it should have been 42. So, Mr. Speaker, generally y'all give them a few minutes to look if they have any questions.
They've had a few minutes while you're talking, and they're now looking at you and not looking at there. So is everybody good? Ronnie, we may not trust many people in this building, but we trust the two of you, especially during the summer. Does anybody have any questions? Do y'all want more time to look over them? Are y'all satisfied with Ronnie's explanation as to these changes? And Ms. Yates, I saw where we changed a his to or her. Did you catch that? The bottom of page 7 regarding pawned goods. You can get yours back too, not just me. So, anybody have a question or concern?
Or just a general question, again, like about what criteria we use. Yeah, just do I have an emotion?
All right, at this point, I would entertain a motion to accept these changes as recommended by council from our 24 legislative code errors, if you will.
He beat you.
I'll recognize the motion from the more deliberative body. They were actually quick with a motion, and I like that. Senator England's motion that we approve and second by the gentleman from Jackson, the pro tem. Is there any further discussion before we vote? All right. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? All right. All right, at this time, I'm going to recognize Ethan. He's going to go through there in section 3 on your agenda where we've got multiple amendments to the same code section. Ethan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the last handout in your packet. But next to last, you have a letter from Lexus. Next to last, it's the thick one that's bounded by staples. So the first 2 or 3 pages on here is just the authority, and Ronnie has touched on this, so I'm not going to go into great detail on this, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Section 109L is the authority that we function under to integrate code, the code sections where more than one bill has amended a code section. So the Joint Committee is authorized to integrate the amendments that may have been made in more than one act of the legislature in a single session to the same code section or provision of law, so that all versions of the same code section or law that were enacted during a single session may become effective. And this is the part, this is why I'm reading this, is if effectuating such amendments is consistent with the intent of the legislature. So that goes along with what Ronnie was saying. We're not legislating here, we're making sure that the intent of the legislature is preserved at sine die. The Joint Code Committee has also adopted guidelines when it will not integrate multiple amendments. So in 1997 and then later in 2000, they said that they will not integrate multiple amendments unless the amendments are standalone amendments. That means they don't conflict with each other in meaning and they don't overlap with each other. If the committee tried to integrate amendments that overlapped where the language was the same, you would end up being legislating. And then if you turn to page 2, the Joint Committee has adopted a policy to determine when it will integrate amendments. And that was in the September 18th, 2000 meeting. And so the committee will, just as a matter of course, integrate the language of both bills if A, the amendments are standalone, meaning that they don't conflict or overlap with each other, and B, there's no express legislative intent in the bills that indicate that the language should not be integrated. So a lot of times the attorneys, when we have time and we're writing the conference reports, or we're writing a bill, you'll see that language on the floor that kind of throws members that aren't on this committee as amended by another bill. That's language in that bill that says we know that bill exists and we're intending to overwrite that bill. So that's express legislative intent that those bills are not merged by this committee. And that language can come in a bunch of different forms, but it's usually used in the lead-in of the section, and then it's used in the title as well. And then if and we're all familiar with section 1379 as to which bill controls. So if the amendments aren't standalone and they do conflict with one another, we look to which bill controls under 1379, and which bill controls is the one that has the latest effective date. And if those effective dates are the same, we look to the date that the governor signed the bill. And then if he signed it on the same day, we'll actually look to the signature, the time that he actually signed the bills. If you turn to page 3 on your handout, you can see this table on pages 3 through 5. And these are the bills that we're talking about today. There are 41 code sections that were amended by different bills, at least 2 different bills, and some had multiple bills. Of those, 15 have controlling language. 4, the section was just brought forward, so we don't have to consider those. And then there were 3 bills that had the same amendments, so you don't have to integrate those. There were 2 bills this last session that don't meet the guidelines for integrating. And those 2, if you turn to page 2, that was, you'll see that with a double asterisk on 37-151-81. That there, it was intended for the new education funding formula to override a previous bill. And then the other one is on page 5, section 77-7-345, and that was just the difference in a date of repeal. One had, I think, 2027 and one had 2026. So we can't integrate those because it's conflicting language. There are 17, though, marked with a single asterisk that we'll go through. And Mr. Chairman, I may kind of defer to your wishes on this as far as how detailed I go through. I can go through each one, or we can kind of give the committee time to look through the packet. But I would like to explain the first one, just to give you an idea.
Explain the first one, and then if everybody's good, we'll move on. But if not.
Sure. Okay. Turning to page 7 is section 337, and then the language is on page 9. So and it goes along with that table you have as well. So the table has the bill that is controls bolded. And so that first subsection 6 is from House Bill 365, and it names the Mississippi Musicians Month. And then House Bill 124 also had a subsection 6, and it was to recognize the Tuskegee Airmen. So what we did was we made House Bill 124 the subsection 7 based on the time that it was signed. And when you vote to integrate, you will also be saving this yellow language here. So this yellow language is the language that would be wiped out if the code committee didn't exist or we chose not to integrate this section. And as we go through, you'll see that throughout the packet. There's a few that I might just highlight. On pages 14 and 15 is actually the compromise bill, the Senate Bill 3231, the PERS bill would actually be wiped out without integration. And I can just give you a minute to flip through there. I can point you towards some of the page numbers. Pages 24 and 25 is where we moved it from 7 days to 30 full working days for getting a required privilege license for motor vehicles. That language will be wiped out. And then another one that's a significant portion of language. A lot of these, sometimes it's not a whole lot of language. Like one of them is literally, or they're designees for a task force. That's something that y'all can fix next year. But a lot of this is very substantive language in entire bills. On page 51, let me back up and get that code section. That's code section 377303. And Senate Bill 2740 actually authorized local governments to pool risk for insurance. And that entire bill would be wiped out because of the education funding formula. There was just no way to conform that at the time. Those conference reports were going at the same time. But Mr. Chairman, I'll defer to you if there are any other questions.
You have questions about any of these others? Y'all want him to continue running through them, or y'all satisfied? I think that's all.
Yeah.
Well, I see a few more, but they're very minor. Yeah. Gentlemen.
So just for clarity, you said it was the insurance bill that would be wiped out. Nothing, no sections in the funding formula. Is that correct?
That's right. The funding formula was signed last in time, and it would have been the insurance section. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Ms. Yates.
Can you just go over the two that don't meet the criteria for merging and explain to us what will not be merged, like what's lost?
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. And I should have printed those out. Let me pull it up real quick. I think I had a note on that. Yeah, and that's section 37-151-81, and that's the funding formula. It overwrote the Preschool Reporting Requirements Act, Senate Bill 2246. And there just wasn't a need. What was overwritten there was just totally related to the Mississippi Adequate Education Protection, the old funding formula, subsection 1. And then the new funding formula rewrote that section. And then the other one was section 77-7345. And that I'd have to pull the bill up to know which repealer it was, but it was literally just the difference of a date between like 2027 and 2026. Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
And I would, Mr. Chairman, I would ask for any motion to be made retroactive to the effective dates of those bills. The mergers. So when we integrate, it should be made retroactive to the effective date of each respective bill.
All right. I don't see any further questions. I would entertain a motion that we approve these with the caveat that the merger be retroactive to the enacting date of the particular legislation that's involved in the mergers. Senator Thomas, is there a second? Gentleman from Rankin, Mr. Shanks, with a second. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor say aye. Opposed? All right. All right, you've also got in your packet, the last thing there is the letter from LexisNexis concerning item 4 on your agenda, approval of prices for code products for this year. Anders, I believe, is going to speak to us at this time, so I'll recognize him. He will present from the podium. Gentlemen, you're recognized. Is it green?
Now it is. Now it is green. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks for everybody coming here on this warm August day. As Ronnie mentioned before, and this is important to highlight, if you look at the contract that Ronnie handed out earlier on, at the bottom of page 1, when he talks about the duties of the publisher, the only way we get paid is by selling books. The state does not pay for all of the work that our team does throughout the year. Our work doesn't stop and it doesn't end. Throughout the year, we have people that do case notes, we look at every single case that's handed down by Mississippi Appellate Courts. We write case notes. We start in January to work on the replacement volumes because there's a lot of work that goes into recompiling volumes. We work over the summer. The work is extra intensive. We look at every act. We do a lot of back and forth with Ronnie and Ethan to make sure that the acts go in the right place. And for that work that we do on a rolling basis, we get paid by the books we sell. Therefore, this year, we're asking for a modest 6% price increase. As you know, today was the inflation day. We're all glad to see that it's going down, but since the start of the pandemic in particular, we have seen increasing cost pressures in our industry. The cost for the materials we use, the salaries we pay to our editors, attorneys, and indexers have gone up. If you look at the index, and that specific index is mentioned in section 5.1 as one of the factors, that price index has gone up by a whopping 57% since the year 2020. I've been doing this for 20 years. It's actually the 20th time I'm here in Jackson for the Code Committee meeting, and it's just been extraordinary. We do what we can. If you look at the letter, page 3, there is a chart of the producer price index showing the evolution since I picked the start of 2020 as an arbitrary date. And then on the last page is a comparison of the price evolution of replacement volumes. The top line is the price that the private industry pays, and the lower line is the price that the state pays, which is 50% of the public price. So you will see that chart has been considerably flatter, and therefore we respectfully request a 6% increase to try to keep up with the general prices that we face.
Any questions of the gentleman? I don't see any. Thank you, gentlemen. I think that's, the chair would entertain a motion at this time that we approve the publications of the ones that have to be replaced, as well as the price increase, including the 6%. As the gentleman notes in his letter, we did not approve a 3/4% increase last year. And so I would entertain a motion that we approve of these prices for code products for this year. That would include about a 6% increase, as well as the publications that are being replaced. Is that correct, counsel? I believe the gentleman from Jackson makes the motion. Mr. Barton. I see a second. Second from the senator. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? All right. Thank y'all. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, I believe that concludes our business on our agenda. We have an item 5 that says any additional business, and coming from a board attorney background representing cities, counties, and water associations, this is the part I don't like, council, when I say, is there any further business? Because that's where we usually get in trouble. So I don't see anybody seeking recognition, so I'll take it that there is no additional business. All right. We're official. The lieutenant governor's here, so we're all official. Any further business? Question, comment, or concern? All right, I would entertain a motion that we rise and report. Senator England. All right. All in favor of that motion? All right. Y'all are an enthusiastic group, but thank you for being here for sure. Thank you.